NBA, NHL, UFC, and I promise I'm going to sprinkle in just a little bit of bare knuckle fighting for this weekend. Welcome, everyone, to Prop It Up. I am Andy Lang from WagerTalk.com, being joined, as always, by my fellow prop master, Andrew McGinnis from WagerTalk.com. Just got a few nuggets we want to go over for today's show because we do have some pretty good spots here. Not a lot of NHL games on Fridays these days, but man, Saturdays are jam-packed. A lot of profits there. So, Andrew, let's just get right into it. NHL, we'll get into some of these props. For me, low volume has been working out great, and picking my spots with these streaks has been fantastic. I was very happy last night to cash on Jake DeBrusk to not have a point, and RIP Brandon Hagel's streak of having a point. I believe that came to an end last night. 14 games in a row. But it does go to show when you're riding these streaks, they do come to an end. So, you got to be a little bit careful. What have you been noticing in the prop world here in NHL, and what are we looking at for tonight and tomorrow?
That's pretty awesome, Andy. In the same game that I cashed a team total over 3.5, you cashed a guy on that team to not get a point. So you got to love that, that we were both able to get a winner out of that situation. Bruins finished with 5 goals, but DeBrusk does not get a point. It's a great situation for the both of us there. Andy, I've been talking about this on all kinds of shows lately, and I think I did mention it on Prop It Up before, but I'm curious your thoughts on this. When we're referencing overs and unders for point props, as I would say I've shifted a lot more towards the point props myself in the NHL, I actually find that on the weaker teams, I've had a lot more success with the overs, and on the stronger teams, I've had more success betting the unders. And I kind of noticed that a little bit, the unders from you, got that from you with the Panarins and some of these bigger name teams, because let's face it, if you're a good team, you have all kinds of options offensively. If you're a not so great team, you have very minimal options offensively. I was on Wager Talk today last week. I gave out a player prop on Juraj Slafkovsky from the Montreal Canadiens and Nick Foligno from the Chicago Blackhawks. And what's so great about those props, Andy, Nick Foligno is plus 110 every night to get a point. Right now, besides Connor Bedard, I'm shocked saying this in 2024, Foligno is one of their best offensive players, which is really sad to say, but it's true. And Slafkovsky, top line guy now with the Habs, but because they're so bad, they're keeping him at like minus 125, 130 to record a point. Meanwhile, Nick Suzuki has gotten a point in like 15 of his last 16 games. He's his line mate. He is like minus 230, 240 to get a point some nights against certain matchups. So one thing I have really noticed, so a couple guys I have circled, one of them is applicable for tonight here, would be Shane Pinto. Ironically, here on the betting show, this guy was suspended for being involved in sports betting stuff several months ago, but he's back now. And since he got back, man, he has looked good. Whether it's been player point or whether it's been shots on goal, he's been making a difference. He's got a point, I believe, in 6 of his last 10 games. And he has a shot over 2.5 shots on goal in 7 of his last 10 games. Good news is you're still only getting like the minus 130 price here on this because, again, he hasn't played the full season. If he played the full season, Andy, I believe we'd be getting a much worse number. And now for the Anaheim Ducks, a guy worth looking at, Frank Vetrano. He's been pretty much the only guy worth talking about on the Anaheim Ducks this season. So if you want to look at them and for them to have any sort of success, they're playing the New Jersey Devils. They're playing at home tonight. So, I know sometimes what I'm trying to say here, Andy, I know sometimes for these bad teams, it can be so tempting when you see a plus 225, a plus 150. But a lot of times these teams are getting their asses kicked, but their top guys are getting on the board. Last night, perfect example. The Canadiens put up a good effort. They lose 4-3 to the Panthers in a shootout. Slafkovsky scores. Nick Suzuki scores. Cole Caulfield gets 2 points. That's what you have to be worrying about, I think, when looking at the NHL. Because, how many times did you cash on Panarin under 1.5 points when he got 1 point in many of those games? But the books are setting it at 1.5. So, McKinnon, Makar, whatever, some of these top tier guys, their prices are what they are, and they're a little bit higher. So you can actually make more money, I'd say, betting unders on some of those guys and betting overs on some of the guys on bottom tier teams.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, with Panarin, obviously he's 1.5 points for a reason because he's their main guy. And, when he goes on these, when he goes on one of these streaks about not like when going under, eventually he's going to get a couple points or he's going to have one of those monster 3-point games, because the books are not willing to come off of that like 1.5. So you have to be really careful if you're playing the unders because he'll get a great matchup against the Ducks or the Sharks or one of these things, and so you've been riding these really good streaks of him to not have over 1.5, and so sometimes it's just best to like lay off. So yeah, I'm with you. I noticed Cale Makar has kind of been going under. I was not on him last night. Again, Blackhawks. Again, there's another team where it's like you just have some of these guys where you can't play them under when they're going up against these bad teams. And I'm kind of finding that's what I see a little bit tonight. Like on paper, some of these games, well, I mean, there's only 3 of them, but like, the Coyotes and Senators, that could be a 5-4 game. The Devils and the Ducks, that could easily, be a high scoring game. So the Flyers and the Capitals, that one could be low scoring. There's only 3 games tonight. I won't be in play on that one. But tomorrow, I did the lazy line of the week video. That's where, we try and look at a line that has, the books just keep putting the same thing out night after night after night, and we can take advantage. And it was about Evander Kane. And so we broke down Evander Kane to not have a point. I was kicking myself because he was on this streak where he doesn't have points. And whenever he does have a point, it's against a bad team. And so they were playing the St. Louis Blues, who've been giving up a ton of goals. I laid off of him. He didn't have a point, but he's got a tough stretch. He plays the Kraken, he plays the Penguins, he plays the Bruins in 3 games. So I'm going to be firing away on Evander Kane, hoping for 3-0, expecting 2-1, on those. So when I'm looking at some of the matchups tomorrow, I think we got some really, really good ones. The Golden Knights coming off of that kind of high-scoring game, but they get the Sabres. You could look at a Buffalo Sabre person to not have a point. Rangers and Maple Leafs, there's one where you might actually look at Panarin over on that one because you know how Toronto games are. They can just be absolute circuses. But then you got a Blue Jackets and Blackhawks. I bet nobody's going to be watching that game outside of the people in the arena. But like you said, there's it's a bad matchup. Why not look at Connor Bedard to have a point? Why not look at Foligno to have a point when they've got those, really, really good matchups? So I'm finding that I'm looking at these matchups and taking more into account the streaks as well as the individual matchups, because if you're not looking at the matchups, you could really get yourself in trouble, and you could just look at the price and be like, oh, what a great price. And like, well, yeah, I'm taking him to not have a point because he's going up against a really, really bad team. Tonight might be a good night to lay off. So team totals, what are you noticing with team totals? Are you focusing on same teams, or are you kind of playing the matchups night to night?
Andy, I've been focusing on plus money with team totals, and I know that just sounds very generic to say, but yesterday, perfect example, I actually debated whether taking the Vegas Golden Knights team total under the 2.5 there or the Bruins team total over 3.5. And, one of them was plus 115, 120, and that was the decider for me. And you're looking at some of these matchups here, and you can really catch teams off guard. And a lot of times these teams, when they're in these tricky situations, they're going to get 4 goals, and it's the magic number, but not just to get 4 goals. I know you're all about managing the bankroll, taking care of the bankroll. Well, the VIG is a lot of the time what screws people's bankrolls, right? But the best part about these team totals, a lot of times, if you go 1-1, but you've got 2 team total overs at plus 125, guess what? You had a winning night. If you take 2 team totals of the biggest favorites on the board and they're minus 140, and only one of them hits, you had a losing night. So as far as the team totals, I've really been focusing in on the plus money. Trying to find some of these spots here, good bet on opportunities, trying to find teams that, are off rough travel spots. And, one thing I've noticed quite a bit, Andy, lately is that the out of conference games I've noticed have been more higher scoring and good for team totals, where the interdivision and interconference games have been a little bit tighter. So I'm kind of betting more unders on those and being more cautious. A lot of that's to do with, these teams knowing each other, the playoff implications on the line. Obviously if there's a tiebreaker in your division, you need to be able to say that you've defeated this team in the matchup throughout the season, right? So Vegas and Toronto was a perfect example. Toronto playing in Vegas, Vegas all kinds of banged up. Their key players are out. Toronto having a great road trip. Boom, their team total over cashes in Vegas. Vegas goes to Toronto. Toronto feeling satisfied for the last 5 games. First game at home after a road trip, a weekday game in Toronto, as we all know, isn't usually a good bet on spot for them. And then Vegas puts up 6 on them in their home arena. And some of those bet on spots, Andy, have been really intriguing for me.
Love it. Let's move our attention to the NBA. I've been focusing on the 3-pointers. It's weird, trying to get as specific as possible. Not only have I been focusing on the 3-pointers, I've been focusing on a specific number, 1.5, and trying to find guys to go over 1.5. LeBron has gone over 1.5 3-pointers. We rode that streak for a while. Yesterday, they bumped it up to 2.5, so that streak is kind of over. His teammate, Austin Reeves, has been at 1.5. He's been a pretty good one. Victor Wembanyama keeps cashing at 1.5. Last night, we hit Colin Sexton at 1.5. He's taking a lot of shots these days. Minutes are up. Points are up. So I won't be playing LeBron anymore, but I think Colin Sexton may be a guy that I try and ride here a little bit. And I don't know about you, Andrew. I get so overwhelmed sometimes looking at how many props there are in the NBA. And I wonder if sometimes that's how the books get you. Like, there's so many props. It's like, my God, we could play 1,000 of these every night. So I've been trying to narrow it down as much as possible. I'm 3-2 in NBA props this week. So any profit's good profit. Nice 4-1 week in NHL. So I'm finding that getting as specific as possible is like working out well in some of these sports. Friday looks like NBA. We got a few games tonight, and of course Saturday's going to be pretty good. What have you noticed about NBA these days?
Just like yourself, man, there are so many options out there. It's unbelievable. There's so many different ways to look at it. And I like what you said there about, you're focusing on the 3-pointers right now, or I'm focusing on the assists in certain times. Sometimes I'm looking at rebounds. You can look at all of it, but sometimes you just find what's working for you and you roll with it, right? You find what's working and you kind of don't go away from it. And that's why I stuck with the team totals for a bit, the NHL, then, looking at certain player props, NHL points, shots. But I mentioned this last week, I think, but I kind of want to just reiterate that I kind of like looking for the ones that people might not expect. So you think of a center, you think of rebounds, you think of a point guard, you think of playmaking and assists. Well, this one would be more of like kind of probably a same game parlay piece here, Andy, because it's quite juiced. But Miles Turner has gone over his assist prop. It's either 0.5 or 1.5 in 9 of his last 10 games. So, I mean, his is only 1.5, but the fact is 9 of his last 10 games, I think 12 of his last 14, he's moving the ball around. They're at least running 1 or 2 sets for him to be able to dish the ball off out of timeouts, out of certain areas, whether he gets a rebound, passes it out to somebody else and they score and gets the assist that way. He's getting rewarded that way. Brooks Lopez, he's been somebody that's underrated as well. Took a look at his number. It's 1.5 at -115. Gone over it in 7 of his last 10 games. Chicago ranks 23rd in the league in rebounds given up per game. That's both offensive and defensive combined. So Brooks Lopez, I think that, for him, I look at the rebounds. He's getting offensive rebounds and dishing the ball out. And so whether it's them creating sets, creating plays for him to actually get the ball and move it himself, or just getting a rebound, not having the space to go up for it and passing the ball, looking at him for his assist prop. And of course, it's been a little bit of a tough season, man, here in north of the border. to watch the Raptors, so I haven't really had them on my TV as much this year. But Jakob Poeltl, I think I'm going to continue to look at his assist prop as well, as you're seeing a pretty good number for him. He moves the ball around, and at the same time, they don't have like that big man like post game with him. Like, honestly, he can't back anybody down. He's not going to be that monstrous presence in the paint. So a lot of times he's catching the ball on the elbow. He's catching the ball at the free throw line. So he's able to find flash cutters, find guys at the 3-point line and make those passes. And I just love the small numbers. I love you're getting a half, 1.5 or 2.5 plus money with the big men. Even look at Wembanyama. I mean, you're going to get like 2.5 plus money with his assist prop. That's really enjoyable. So that's what I've been looking at tonight, Andy. And the one I will be betting for tonight is the Brooks Lopez one.
Love that one. I've been looking at Jokic in his back-to-backs, taking his under points, rebounds, and assists. The Nuggets, they got bigger fish to fry than winning a bunch of regular season games. Obviously, they want the number 1 seed, but he's been going under on these back-to-back situations. And you look at the game last night against the Miami Heat, and the books are just taking his averages, and that's the number. And so you got a really inflated line against a Miami team that plays with the slow pace. And so, he goes for 18, 11, and 7, which is a great night, but it's nowhere near his points, rebounds, and assists. Like, it's not even close. So, we were able to cash that one. I will say this, though. Jamal Murray got hurt last night. And if you go look, when Jamal Murray got hurt earlier in the season, Jokic, he flew over points, rebounds, and assists. Like, they could not put the line high enough. This guy was hitting 75, 80% of the game. So we're going to have to monitor Jamal Murray's injury and see, how long he's going to be out, if he's going to be out at all. If he's out for an extended period of time, this is a great opportunity to fire away on Jokic, because you go back and look at his numbers, and they are just going ballistic without Jamal Murray in there. So I also noticed that Michael Porter Jr. had a huge night, 23 field goal attempts, 4 of 10 from 3-pointers. That's without Murray. So without Murray, there's a lot of stats that those starters are going to have to absorb for Denver, and they are not a deep team. This is not a team that can bring a bunch of guys off the bench. This is Reggie Jackson and Christian Braun as the guards. So I think Denver could be a gold mine for some overs here. If I'm looking at
the books take time to adjust too. The books take so long to adjust.
Yeah, they've got their algorithms and their software, and so I'm sure they'll take it into account. But you don't see huge adjustments on these props. Like, LeBron was at 1.5 3-pointers for weeks before they put him up to 2.5. And what do we always say when the books make a move on a prop line like that? Just get ready to fire the other way. And sure enough, the books go from 1.5 3-pointers to 2.5. We should have come back and played. LeBron only hit 2, and that was in overtime. Guy played 39 minutes. So be careful when these books make adjustments. It feels like they're late to adjust, and when they do make the adjustment, it's perfect time to go the other way, because the streak is getting ready to come to an end. So you get this kind of perfect scenario with that one. So anything else in NBA, or you want to move to UFC?
Well, Andy, I just wanted to say, like, I mentioned there about like the books adjusting, and I'm still so annoyed now that I've really gotten back into following NBA and doing the props and looking at certain bet on situations. I'm already tired of the question marks next to players' names. I've been saying it on every show I'm on talking about NBA, but I really do believe, like, look at the Lakers. When Anthony Davis is out, you bet the center on the other team. When he's in, you bet the under on the centers on the other team. I truly believe you can look at team total overs for the other team. Like, it's a matter of looking at some teams when they're without their key guard, the ball isn't going to be moving around as much. They're not going to be able to make as many plays. The fast break game isn't going to be there. I'm looking at their unders. Like, it's something to me that I know it sounds so simple, but I feel like a lot of times the keep it simple, stupid escapes us. When teams are without certain players, I feel like some stuff is an automatic play. And with Anthony Davis, a lot of the time, the second that I see that he might even be considering not playing in a game because, he's got a hangnail or something. I like to look towards the opposing team center because it frees up the lane. He is a huge presence there in the paint. So I'll ask you, Andy, like, how much do you react to these players being out? I remember during COVID, you had a lot of success taking advantage of being like, okay, how does this team play without this guy? Or how does that team play without this guy? Because right now I have a few teams lined up where when this guy's not in there, I'm betting this position on the other team.
Yeah. Boy, that's a great question. I don't know. I maybe that falls into the category of like you can overthink things and you can overcomplicate things. I don't know. I don't know. COVID was my best year of NBA. It was the books really struggled, and I find that's where you have to do your damage when the books are struggling with the lines. Like we can break down the games and we can predict them, but that's the concept of calling our segment the lazy line. It's when the books don't know what to do. So I think that's really more of what I'm looking for with them. So I don't know. I've found the more success I have is just when I keep things as simple as it possibly can get. And so only focusing on a few teams, only focusing on a few positions, and maybe only focusing on a few on a few different props here. So guys in the chat, hit the like button if you could, and please leave us a comment here. Tell us what your best bets are. Tell us what you're liking here for the weekend, and tell us about some props that you've been writing for a while. I know Lou was talking about Pelicans first quarter or half tonight. Andy's saying Suzuki's been on fire for Montreal Canadiens. So good stuff, guys. So hit the like button, leave us a comment. Before we get to UFC, I will tell everyone I have a 5% UFC play that is up. We are coming off a beautiful 5% win last weekend, and this is a bare knuckle fighting weekend. So I'm going to attach my bare knuckle play of the week to that 5% UFC play. You can get that over at WagerTalk.com. Having a really nice couple of weeks, coming off of a sweep. Last night we had one NBA and one NHL play that was up. No better time to take advantage of these 5% UFC plays and bare knuckle. This is a great card. We're going to talk about a couple of those plays. Go ahead and lock that in. We're having a fantastic season so far. 5% UFC play is up. Andy Lang at WagerTalk.com. Andrew, what do you have up over at WagerTalk.com?
Yeah, cashed a 5% playing the NHL 2 days ago, followed it up with a 3% winner yesterday. And despite the small board, I do like a play for 4% play tonight on the Friday board in the NHL. So really looking forward to that, Andy. And as far as the MLB, actually off to a profitable start to spring training. Very low volume with spring training, but you can find some good plays, some good lines here. Following those lineups, and I still have that great deal going over at WagerTalk.com. Get the first half of my MLB season, number 2 last year at WagerTalk in totals. A lot of that being team totals, and I am releasing some prop bets as well, and not really strikeout props, more so base props throughout the season with some of these teams. So if you guys go to my homepage, WagerTalk.com, you can sign up with me for my first half of the season in the MLB. We'll try and cash some tickets. 1 to 2 plays released per day in the MLB.
Love it. Strange UFC card coming up. We've already had one fighter who got busted lying about his record. So that happened last night. Occasionally you'll see these guys come over from Russia, and yeah, their record is complete fiction. This guy's got busted. There's a reason why he's like a 9-1 underdog. Umar Nurmagomedov is going to smoke him. What plays are you liking on this UFC card?
Andy, is it bad to say when I see a last name like that, I'm just like, yeah, I'm betting him. Like, oh, that's his last name? Oh, okay, yeah. I got you. That's your last name, no problem. I'm going to go with the Perez and Makayev fight, not to go the distance, Andy. I really like to try and utilize getting the better price, I guess. You know what I mean? You got a massive favorite here, and you're still having to pay a minus 130 price for this not to go the distance. But overall, when you look at the record here, 11-0 MMA record here, 5-0 in the UFC. But what I like is betting on fighters and betting on these unders and fights not to go to the distance with fighters that are be able to make damage on the feet and on the ground. And looking at him, 8 of his last 11 fights overall have not gone the distance here. Perez, for him, 8 of his 10 fights in the UFC have seen them end inside the distance. And I think that when you look at guys that are capable of getting fights on the mat, and kind of doing a lot of wrestling and grappling, people think it's going to be boring, and those are the fights that will go the distance. But a lot of those guys want the fight to go to the mat. They're so dangerous with their submissions, Andy. That's where they're going to end the fight. So I feel like that one does not go the distance. It's a good way to turn a massive favorite. If you really do, want to look at, you could obviously take the favorite to finish it by submission or favorite to finish it inside the distance. But overall, minus 130 price for me, locked in. Perez, Mikhaev under on this one, or to just not go the distance.
Yeah, I'm looking at Ludovic Klein and AJ Cunningham. I'm actually going to go over this one on Wager Talk today. Ludovic Klein is this poor AJ Cunningham, man. I mean, I'm actually kind of worried for him because he's going to get knocked out. He was on Contender Series. He got knocked out by Stephen Nguyen, and Stephen Nguyen's not that good. And he just ate so many shots and so many punches, and that's on that was against a prospect. Ludovic Klein absolutely destroyed his opponent last time, and his opponent was really good. Bahamondes, he damaged him up bad. I'm not making any accusations. I'm just saying Ludovic Klein looked way stronger in his last fight. And let's just say he hit a lot harder than he has in previous fights. And AJ Cunningham has a very, very, it's a rough story about how his childhood. So it's good to see him get a shot in the UFC. Unfortunately, he's just going to get smoked. So I'm taking that fight to not go the distance. You can take, Ludovic Klein to win by knockout as well. I love Christian Leroy Duncan versus Claudio Ribeiro, and I kind of like Duncan by finish, mostly because Claudio Ribeiro has absolutely no cardio whatsoever. And I don't mean he gets tired in the third round. I mean he gets tired in the first round, and he's just not very good. He has one win in the UFC. It was against Joseph Holmes, who is terrible, and he's gotten finished in his other 2 fights. And Christian Leroy Duncan fought a similar fighter last time out, Dennis Lulin, and Duncan he pushed Tululin up against the fence, didn't let Tululin get any punches off. Tululin gets exhausted, and then Duncan finishes him. I think he's going to do the exact same thing to Ribeiro. He's minus 325. I just don't see how Ribeiro lasts 3 rounds. I think that fight doesn't really go the distance at all. So the other interesting thing that you have going here, Andrew, is Shamil Gaziev, minus 175 against Rosenstrike. This is his second fight in the UFC. How are we not talking about this enough? This is his second fight in the UFC, and he's a favorite in the main event. And the scary part is I love him to win by finish. I don't think Rosenstrike is good at all. Rosenstrike's wins are against Chris Daukaus, who I don't think is in the UFC anymore. And you go down the list of who Rosenstrike wins, and it's against bums. Gaziev is really good, and Gaziev is 34, but he got into mixed martial arts late in life. So even though I think he's 1 year older than Rosenstrike, but he's just absorbed less damage. I think Rosenstrike is just on the downside. Meanwhile, Gaziev is like 34, 35, and he's kind of on the upside. I think he wins, and I think he knocks out Rosenstrike. I don't think Rosenstrike's very good at all. I don't know if you had any opinions on the main event.
Not that it matters, I guess, but I like Rosen. Like, I want him to win. I like the guy. I don't know. I like how he fights. I always enjoy his fights. I like him in the pressers. But I agree with you, man. I think that this is an opportunity. Whenever you see something like this, you hear people say in college basketball, MLB, NHL, when you see a line set a certain way, how many people that are casual UFC fans can even tell you who this guy is fighting in the main event? Right? But everybody knows Rosenstrike, but they know the fights that he's won against bums. They know the fight that he has looked unbelievable in, and they put him in these fight nights. They put him against guys that were certainly winnable, and now they put him in this fight, and look at what the odds are. That should tell us all we need to know about the past few victories that he has had. And I've noticed a lot of times, Andy, these main events, I've noticed more upsets in main events on pay-per-view cards than fight nights. It seems to me
Absolutely.
like fight
Absolutely.
nights, yeah, the main cards and fight nights are almost like to push these guys through and kind of elevate them a little bit and build them up a little bit. So I would look towards that. Now I'm curious your opinion though. Does any part of you think this one could go over 1.5? Because it's going to be an absolute shit show from start to finish. But sometimes with these fights, I like to look at sneaky overs with the over 1.5. Like, is there going to be any type of feel out process, or is it going to be just like they're just banging the second they start out there?
I would expect them to bang. Rosenstrike can absolutely, drop the hammer. But both of these guys do have grappling and wrestling in their arsenal. So I do kind of like the over. I know where you're going with that one, because you could absolutely see him clinch. And sometimes in these main events, and my theory on why you see some of these boring matches on the pay-per-views is these guys don't want to get knocked out on a pay-per-view. And so you end up with a cautious attack. Or by the time these guys make it onto the pay-per-view, they're getting paid big money and they're just not as aggressive. Like these guys on these fight nights and these undercards, they're trying to show off for Dana White. They got to make a name for themselves. So they're going out trying to put on a good show, kill or be killed. If you're in the main event on a pay-per-view, who are you trying to impress? You just don't want to get highlight reeled. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to, you
Yeah.
don't want to be the guy that in 20 years they're showing the same knockout of you getting flatlined and so you end up with these cautious fighters. I don't think it's a bad look. That being said, it's not a pay-per-view and these guys do need highlight finishes. These guys are trying to impress people. They want to move up, they want to move up through the rankings. So I get where you're going. It could be some wrestling in there. But I also, these guys are tough. Like these guys are really, really tough guys. So even if they do land on each other early, I think they can weather the early storm. So I don't think it's a bad look at all. So can I do a little bit of bare knuckle here, Andrew, before we get out of here?
Yeah,
So
only
bare
if you can give me a
knuckle.
minute to just load up my page and I'll just tail the plays you're talking about.
All right. All right. So this is not only is this bare knuckle fighting, which already has bad fighters in it. This is prospects. So these aren't even like the professionals. You have one fight that features two people who have never fought before. I'm not joking. You have people that have never boxed before. You have one guy who is already booked in a kickboxing match 3 weeks from now. So he's planning on not getting his ass kicked in this fight. And we had this situation in the last event where a guy had a mixed martial arts event a month out. And so he did good in the first round. And then the second, he got touched in the second round. He just took a knee and was out. That's kind of what you're dealing with in bare knuckle here. Ruben Roundstone and Stan Surmaz, I believe is how you pronounce it. You can get to under 1.5. It's minus 255. I don't think there's a chance that you see this one hit the second round. Ruben Roundstone has never boxed. He's like this MMA guy, and he's not even that good at MMA. And Stan is a boxer, so this is just like a complete mismatch. There's another one that's not going to see the second round. I think the Desi Johnson and Robert Descharnay. Desi Johnson comes from MMA, and he only has a couple wins in his entire career, and they're against the same guy. And that guy's 0-8. And so he loses in the first round to everybody he faces except this guy whose name is Ferrero. And he's fighting a guy whose name is Robert Descharnay. Descharnay's never bare knuckle boxed. Doesn't it say a lot that he's minus 835? Even though he's never boxed, but he's minus like 800 to just absolutely kill this Desi Johnson guy. This Desi Johnson has got fraud written all over it. Like, I don't know how you beat the same guy twice, and that those are like all your career wins. Like, who keeps booking these fights? So, and in the main event, we got Gabriel Roman and Jade Wong. Jade Wong should win this one. I think they got pretty high aspirations for her. She's minus 215, so nice little parlay piece. But It's wild, man. And this this card is after UFC. UFC starts middle of the afternoon, and this bare knuckle starts immediately after. So if you want our official plays, we've never lost a bare knuckle play on Wager Talk. Like we're undefeated lifetime. So we attach that to the 5% play. So you have enough time between now and tomorrow to get your find the sports books that have the bare knuckle fighting on it, so we can cash in that one. So it's wild, Andrew. I keep telling people I think this is one of the sports that in a year it's going to be big. It keeps getting added to more and more states. So I'm hoping to get out of here, or I'm hoping to kind of get ahead of the market and really start to know these fighters. There's a lot of former UFC fighters that are coming over that are having success. So it's a great sport. I love it. I love it.
I'll take that over power slap any day of the week and twice on Sunday. So anything but power slap for me, Andy. I'm good.
Absolutely. Andrew, we're going to get out of here real quick. Tell everyone what you have up and where we can find you at.
Yeah, back-to-back winning days in the NHL. A little 2-day, 8% run here. So looking to keep it going. 4% play tonight in the NHL. And again, a reminder, number 2 at totals last year in the MLB at WagerTalk.com. You can get my MLB start of the season to all-star break special at my homepage, WagerTalk.com. It's a great deal. If you don't want to get the full season, first half of the season is a great way to start.
Love it. Go grab that 5% in the UFC. It's going to come with our bare knuckle play. And we just put up a 4% lacrosse play, 10-3 run on lacrosse. Nice cash earlier this week in the Lemoyne game. So we got a play on a really, really top tier game. Grab that over at WagerTalk.com. All right, that's going to do it for us, guys. Good luck on all your plays. Remember, practice good bankroll management. Let's pick our spots. Make sure we come out of the weekend with a profit. Hit the like button, leave us a comment, and subscribe, and we will see everyone next week on Prop It Up.